It's important to make the right decisions, like when to go for it on fourth down, or when to kick the field goal or go for the touchdown. It's also important to make the right insurance decisions, too. That's why my office, Trey McAdams State Farm, is here to help you select the right protection at the right price. Our office will make sure you understand your State Farm coverages, so you'll know what to expect when the unexpected happens. With Trey McAdams State Farm, it's easy to make the right call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Proud sponsor of the Tennessee Vols.
The Tennessee Vols stayed perfect at home after a dominating win over the Kentucky Wildcats. We've heard since the bye week and in game week how close the Tennessee offense is to clicking. We have to give them credit because we saw just that Saturday night. Nico Imaliava completing 28 of his 38 attempts, about 73%. We saw that there. Paige Dauer, Jimmy Hyams. The greatest thing that we saw was again in that opening drive where you saw a couple of explosive plays. At least 3 of them were 10 plus yards. They did stall though once they got to the red zone. But again, following that Alabama week where we're seeing those explosive plays and those pass plays early, I think is the biggest key to let us know when we're watching the game that there's confidence in Nico and that there's success that they're finding in practice that's translating to game day.
They have stalled on offense by shooting themselves in the foot. Now, they had 2 consecutive games where on the opening drive they drove down the field and fumbled. One was by Nico, one was by Samson. But tonight the thing I wanted to see was whether or not they would pick up in the passing game where they left off against Alabama. For the most part they did. You mentioned the numbers of Nico. He threw for 292 yards. It's the most yards. It's the first time he's had 200 passing yards in 6 games.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say necessarily a slump, but he wasn't playing to his potential. Now, he also had 2 touchdown passes dropped, one by Chris Brazel, one by Chaz Nimrod. He had another pass in the end zone where the tight end was separated from the ball by a really good defensive play. So he could have had 4 touchdown passes instead of 1. I thought he played an excellent game. Josh Heupel felt the same way. In fact, he said, look, playing the quarterback position, you're not going to be perfect. He said, but we got a young quarterback who's getting better with every snap. And that last touchdown drive for Tennessee, they came out throwing. Nico was 3 for 3, and then he converted 2 3rd and 7 pass plays. They go down and score. It ends up being a 28-18 margin was the final, and that kind of put the game away. But I thought Nico played really well, and I see signs of him really stepping up and growing as a quarterback. Now he needs a little bit more help from his receivers.
Yeah, I think building on that as well, what we saw kind of a little bit in that Alabama game to what we saw here in this game was his composure, his confidence, and his coolness, right? You think earlier in this season where these passes they're a little bit all over the place, and I think a lot of that is just him settling in, this being his first, full season as a full-time starter. But in this game, he just seems so much more cool, calm, and collected. We heard Josh Heupel after the game, talking about his composure that he had, his confidence that he was playing with. And I asked him, I was like, okay, well, how about that one touchdown pass to Miles Kitzelman? He was back here near the end or the goal post, and you see Nico rolling out to his right, throws across his body, kind of behind it too, and you see Kitzelman like kind of getting ready for the pass, and he says that absolutely kind of encompasses how much growth Nico's made up until this point.
Yeah, and you're normally taught not to throw it across the grain, but as Heupel said,
unless it works.
Unless it works. And Heupel said he recognized the defense or what they were doing, so he knew that he wasn't throwing it in harm's way. So that's an example of Nico making a really good play. And he is a playmaker, and he's going to continue to get better. And I thought tonight was a really good example of that, to where he threw the ball accurately. He could have completed over 80% of his passes if not for the drop. So I also thought it was interesting that Dylan Samson said, he's getting better, and his feet were calm. And I'm like, how did he know that the feet were calm? You're a running back. But he made note of that, and I think he was right about that. So you're seeing a calmer Nico. I think the game is slowing down a little bit for him. He's gaining confidence, and I do think the passing game, it's so close to being outstanding. It was really good tonight.
Yeah, because you mentioned the 200-plus yards that he had tonight. That was obviously, like you mentioned, the first time this season. And the first time this season that he's completed more than 70% of his passes, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the season against Chattanooga. So for them to be able to do that against a Kentucky Wildcat team that has a similar quality pass defense to Tennessee's, and they were still able to find the success in the pass game, I think that shows you that he's seeing the field better. He's going through his progressions, and he's more collected in the pocket. I also think despite some of the holding penalties, the pocket held up pretty well for him tonight as well. And I think that gives him the time that he needs to feel comfortable and then be confident in his throws.
At Wallace Real Estate, trust is more than just a word. It's been our foundation since 1936. Whether you seek backyard adventures or a quiet spot for your morning coffee, we understand what makes a house a home. Our agents are here to simplify your home journey and to lead you through the process, whether buying or selling. With Wallace Real Estate, you're getting more than guidance. You're gaining a local partner dedicated to bringing your dreams to life. Start your real estate journey at wallacetn.com.
And I thought he scrambled well. I thought he did a nice job with that of extending the plays a little bit. So that's also important. It's also an element of his game, because if it's 3rd and 7, he has the ability to scramble out and get 8 yards and continue a drive. And that's very important for Nico in this offense.
Another player who would not be denied tonight was Dylan Samson. Not only did he get his rushing touchdown earlier in the game to continue that streak, he had another streak where he got the last touchdown of the game for Tennessee, where it took the entire team pushing him across the goal line to get that touchdown. A very meaningful one, as it sets a new program record for single season touchdowns. Just an incredible night for him to continue to find success.
It was. And he broke a record that was set by Gene McKever back in 1929. Yeah. I thought it was interesting that Dylan gave Gene a shout out.
Yeah, he's like, shout out to the McKever family.
Yeah. That was, and what was notable about that, as you mentioned, how it was like 7 people were pushing him, including the quarterback, who escorted him into the end zone. And it kind of shows the camaraderie. Those guys wanted Dylan Samson to score just as much as Samson did. And now he said, now that he has that record, he said, I want to see how far I can push the needle.
Absolutely.
And he's got a lot more touchdowns in him, and he could get to 25, I think. And I think there's a chance he could challenge Derrick Henry's SEC record. I think that's 28.
Yeah, I think so.
I wouldn't rule it out. He's got an opportunity. He's got 4 more games, well, maybe 5 counting the bowl game. So he's had a great year. He's been Tennessee's best player on the season. And in my opinion, he's clearly the best running back in the SEC this year.
What I liked about that final touchdown is we had a chance to also ask Nico. I was like, okay, so what did you see on that touchdown where he's like, you have the pile already. You're like 5 yards back, and you kind of like prance and trot to the pile. And he's like, I think I contributed a little bit to that touchdown. And I was like, whatever momentum you can call it. Again, the brotherhood you were talking about, I just think plays like that and how much they want these goals for each other. You see it on defense with James Pierce Jr. and then being excited when he finally gets that sack. He now has 4.5, I believe, on this season. So it's just really awesome to see that for Dylan Samson. And I like it too, where he's like, you know, it's kind of nice. It kind of has set in that I have set this new program record, but we have so much more to do.
Yeah, and they do. And in fact, he even mentioned if they could just avoid some of the mistakes, whether it's turnovers, whether it's penalties, whether it's sacks, they could have scored 40 or 50 points tonight. And they really could have. And this is a defense. I know they've struggled some lately, but it's a defense that held Georgia to 13 points. It's a defense that went on the road and beat Ole Miss, and I think Ole Miss scored, 17 in that game?
Yeah.
So Kentucky is capable. Now, here's the other part of it, too. Kentucky was minus several defensive players. There were a total of 13 Wildcats that were out of the game, a lot of those on defense. But still, a credit to Dylan Samson, what he's been able to do this season for Tennessee.
Yeah, and I like it too because you were mentioning him, you know, maybe catching Derrick Henry. I saw a graphic earlier in the game when he had his first rushing touchdown that through 7 or 8 games, wherever we are in the season, he now has a new SEC record for that through this point in the season.
Yeah. And it just it underscores how consistent he's been, and he had close to 150 yards tonight. So he's just been to me, he's been one of the top 3 running backs in the nation this year.
And what I like, too, is that despite these back-to-back games where he's having a really uncharacteristic fumble, regardless of how much it's his fault or the ball security, he doesn't let it affect the next play, where so many times you can see these guys, like, get into their own heads, and it impacts the next series or the next sequence. For him, it's just, like, kind of like a snap and clear, and if you remove that one play, you wouldn't even know it happened with how he performed tonight.
Yeah, I asked him after the fumble, you were angry.
Yeah.
He said, no, I wouldn't use the word angry, and he said, I put it behind me, and I said, does it make you run harder? And he didn't really go there, although I think it does.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you kind of want to like go and get that back, right? If I'm a kicker like Max Gilbert and I miss, a field goal, I want to go and get that back. So maybe I want to go make a 50-yarder the next time, you know.
So, but he's been a catalyst for this offense. He's just having a great year.
Yeah, I think the one third thing that we all should know after this game, which kind of goes into the Max Gilbert comment that I made, was them stalling in the red zone. We see that continue to be an issue for this team. Again, another positive opening drive. You compare that to what they did with Alabama. You saw it again here tonight, 3 plays of 10+ yardage. Then it's just all of a sudden they get into the red zone. I don't know if it's mentally because you're trying to punch it in. You've got less yardage to work with, so maybe that changes the schemes and how much you can maybe air it out. And then they just completely stall out. I think on the first drive it was a 3-yard run, no gain, a sack, and then they tried to get a field goal and just didn't get it. And Josh Heupel talking about Max Gilbert as well. He's like, he didn't start with chip shots, but you got to go and make these field goals, and it's just about getting confidence back. But again, what are you maybe seeing with these red zones where they're just kind of collapsing?
Hard to figure. Now the 3 games where they went scoreless in the first half, 3 in a row, by the way, the first time since like 1962 or 3 when that happened. You had a fumble by Samson. You had a fumble by Nico. I don't remember what happened in the other one, the other time, where they didn't score, not just on the first drive, but in the first half. So it was 3 in a row where they didn't do that. In this particular case, they started 0 for 2 in the red zone, and Samson's fumble was on the 22-yard line. It wasn't quite in the red zone. It was close. And then they scored, and then they missed another red zone. Now they did finish with 3 in a row.
Yes.
To their credit.
And it's kind of like right on cue. They're like, oh, we got to go make our halftime adjustments. I think halftime adjustments are probably just like calm down, but it's kind of on cue. Like they get their stride to open the third quarter, and then they kind of just cruise the rest of the way.
And the defense set it up. There was a strip sack fumble on the 28-yard line. Then Will Brooks returned an interception to the 10, and so they scored on those. And then the last score that they had, where I'd mentioned earlier about Nico starting out throwing and then completing a couple of 3rd and 7. So they did finish strong in the red zone, and maybe that will be an impetus going forward that they perform better in that situation. They were credited 4 out of 8 in the red zone. The last one I don't really think they should count it because the game ended with Tennessee on the 19-yard line.
Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't even try for that. But
you take the knee and you're done. Yeah.
But the start of their concern in the red zone and in the first quarter even, if they can clean that up, they're so close to being a really good and complete offense, but they're just having too many times where they shoot themselves in the foot. If they can eliminate that, if they can avoid that, they're going to be a really dangerous team the rest of this month.
And I think you have to kind of start to worry because a number of those times, to credit to the defense, they set you up in plus territory. And a number of times they were not able to capitalize until late into the game.
Yeah, they got the ball one time on their on 45, then on the plus 45, and they didn't capitalize on that. So you need to be able to do a better job of that. When you're given prime field position like that, you need to score. Maybe it's a field goal, but you shouldn't be able to knock it in for a touchdown. But then Max Gilbert, you alluded to it, he was 0 for 3 on field goals. He had a bad night. He was 12 for 12 inside of 50 going into this game, and then he goes 0 for 3. I think that's an aberration. I'm certain his confidence is probably down a little bit.
Yeah.
He needs to regain that because they're going to need him.
I think the confidence is down because you look at his 3rd field goal attempt and he overcorrects. Because I think he was so worried, or in his mind he was still thinking about those last 2 missed field goals. So I think you do hope that he kind of gets over that. But beyond just Max Gilbert, I think you start to get maybe a little concerned with these red zone misses when you're getting later into the season. I mean, who's knocking on the door, a Georgia Bulldog team who for some reason, kind of like Tennessee, it takes them a minute to get going, but when they get going, it's a boat race.
Yeah, and so Tennessee, they got Mississippi State coming up, and that
another
should
night
be
game.
Yeah, another night game. Yeah. But they should be able to handle that. That's going to be a 7 o'clock kickoff. Yeah. Then you got then Georgia's coming. That's going to coming, and it's in
and then
Georgia.
Vanderbilt.
And look, Vanderbilt's no joke, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to watch out. They beat Auburn. So, but for Tennessee, and I know that you're striving for perfection. You're not going to always find it. Yeah. But if they can just eliminate, again, they had a lot of penalties. I think they had 9 penalties tonight. So you got to eliminate that. You got to play a cleaner game than that. You're not often
9 for 77.
Yeah, not often are you going to go without a penalty in the game.
Yeah.
But try to limit it to 2 or 3. And late in the game, you get a sack to put the game away. Omar Norman-Lott had grabbed the quarterback's helmet, ripped it off his head, and there was a face mask penalty, and that extended the drive to keep the thing a little bit more mystery about the game. But They just have to avoid those kind of penalties, and if they can, I think they could really be an exceptional team in November.
Yeah, I think so too. And I just think, kind of building off of these 2 positive points, 3-1, that's definitely a manageable thing that they can fix, hopefully, going into next week, especially in another night game against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I just think it builds a lot of confidence for this team. I think the message that they continue to reinforce is that they're getting better, their best is still in front of them. We're at least seeing them positively make meaningful efforts and steps to get to that.
Yeah, and going back to what we started with, the passing game, I was really impressed a lot of what they did in that. They just need to make sure the receivers catch the football.
Yes.
But if they can, because Nico could have had 400 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But if they can clean that up and the receivers can step up and help out, then I think this passing game can flourish.
Yeah, so I think we can get really excited for next week. I know we were cautiously optimistic following the bye week after what happened in Arkansas. But again, I just think a lot of confidence can build towards next Saturday. But thank you all so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and we will be back Monday for the next game week and for the Josh Heupel press conference. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.